Hi everybody, today we're out here at American Glass Roots with Don, and Don has got something to show you.
Yeah, we're out here, and for all you beginners that don't want to get frustrated, want to make something really cool, we're going to make teddy bears. I'm going to give you a step-by-step on how to make the teddy bears, and as you can see, you can make them in any color, and if you're trying to get a little tonight, a teddy bear never hurts. First, we're going to make sure we have everything we need. I have the color. I have a piece of 12mm rod for the body. I have a punty rod to hold the bear when I make my setup. And then I'm going to just need a pair of tweezers and a graphite reaming tool. First thing we'll start is, my piece of color is rather short, so I've grabbed an extra punty rod. And just like we did this morning, I'm going to slowly introduce them to the flame. I've got the color in one hand, the rod in the other, and we're going to weld the two together so that I'm able to have a longer handle to work with, because you only need about 2 to 3 inches of color to make a teddy bear. So in the same procedure, we get the both piece tips hot. I'm going to roll them, use my marver if I need, but I'm going to try to get a good weld between the two pieces of glass. Because I don't want them falling off while I'm working. And then, like before, I'm going to sit there and wait for the indication to go away. And then give a slight tugging turn, so that I have a nice straight piece of glass to work with, putting the hot side on the hot side of my rest. Now I'm going to start by warming my 12mm up, and then I have a piece of 8mm, approximately 12 inches long, that's going to be my handle. I'm going to apply much more heat to the 12mm because obviously it's a much larger piece of glass and will take more heat to get it molten. Once I get two glowing red tips, I'm going to put them together, and now I'm going to start to apply most of my heat to the 12mm rod, and I'll use my marver to clean it up a little bit. But again, I want to get a good weld that's going to last through the project so that my piece doesn't fall off. Like before, like we did with the smaller rod, I'm going to come out of the fire. I'm waiting for the indication to go away. Once it's gone, I'm going to slowly tug and turn. As time goes on, it gets stiffer. I'm going to tug and turn until I get a nice straight piece of glass. Now I'm going to go back in and warm slowly, approximately 3 to 4 inches out. And that's where I'm going to cut this glass. Now, like we cut the glass this morning, we were using 8mm, 6 and 8mm rods, and we just gave them a little pull to get an hourglass. With this, I'm going to use another tool. It's called the V marver or necking tool, and it's in front of me, and it's that funny-looking black V sitting on a stand. So I'm going to get my glass to the point where it starts to become malleable. Not pressing, I'm just laying it on the V and rolling very gently. And as you can see, I started to get a nice little line. I'm going to go back. I'll do this 2 to 3 times till I get a nice line that I'll be able to separate the glass. Again, I'm rolling with no pressure other than the pressure of the glass itself, the weight. Typically 2 to 3 times is what we're going to look at. Okay, now I have a nice thin section right here in the middle. That's where I'm going to cut the glass just like we did before. I'm going to heat that section, give it a slight tug, and then like bicycle pedals, I'm going to separate the two pieces of glass. So now I've got what's called a setup, and that's a chunk of glass attached to a rod that's much easier to turn. We're going to start by making the head. So I'm going to go ahead and apply my heat, and I'm in a pretty neutral position, and I'm going to apply the heat towards the end of my rod. And you want to keep it at the end because you want to stay in control of the ball. And that's what the goal here is to make a nice round ball at the end of this rod, and that's going to be the head of the bear. So once my glass gets to the point that it's getting to the molten stage, I'm going to start to use a slight upward angle so that the glass will start to fall back down on itself and create a ball. Again, keep the heat on the top of the ball, not on the bottom of the ball, it will turn around all by itself. That's one of the properties of glass. It's magical. One of its magical properties that when you heat it and turn it evenly, it'll turn into a ball. So I'm going to keep doing this until I get about 20% larger to 30% larger than the main section of the 12 millimeter rod for the setup. And as you can see, I'm starting to get a nice round ball like a head. I'm going to keep going to a little bit more here. Something to remember, as you're working on the torch, the candles, the top of the candles are the warmest point or hottest part of your flame. So that's where you want to try to work your glass. Okay, so now I think I'm pretty happy with the size, and I'll continue to turn and let this cool. As it's cooling, I'm going to bring my flame back to a little more defined flame, and I'm going to heat just below the ball. And the purpose of this is we're going to use a V-necking tool to actually make a neck. Not cut a piece of glass, but we're actually going to use it to make a neck. Again, I'm going to get the glass to the molten point. I'm going to roll with very little to no pressure. And now I've accomplished, again, a nice little line that defines the head of the bear. I may do this 3 to 4 times to get a nice clean neckline. I'm going to come around my 3rd time. And again, don't press. If you press, the bear's head will become offset to its body, and it'll take a little bit of correction to get it back. It's not a disaster, but it just will take more time. Okay, so now I'm doing my final cleanup for my neckline. And looking at it, I think I have a nice, clearly defined head. Now, I like my bears to have a little shape, so I'm going to start to apply heat just above where I welded my punty to the setup section, or the 12 millimeter section of glass. Also, something to keep in mind is I'm going to hold it on an angle so the flame is grazing away and it's not going towards my punty. Again, I don't want to get the punty that I'm controlling the glass with anywhere in the malleable or mobile state, because it's going to make it real hard to control. So as the glass starts to indicate, I don't want to get it moving fluidly, so I'm going to take it and I'm going to tap on my marver, and I'm going to tap on my marver, and I turn each time I tap so that it's nice and even. So I'm starting to get a little bit of a bulge at the bottom. And again, this sometimes will take 3, 4, 5 moves to do. Don't try to do it all at once. It'll get way offset, way off-centered, and cause a little bit of frustration. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm tapping and turning on my marver. And again, as you can see, I'm starting to get a little bit of shape for the bottom of the bear. Like I said, this may take 3 or 4 times. Don't rush it. Rushing it will cause you much more problems than going a little slower. Sometimes it seems like the glass really is not moving that much, but it is. Okay, so here I'm coming back where I'm showing a nice indication in color. I'm not moving around, but I'm able to start to tap and get some shape to that bear. So now I'm going to go one more time, and that's going to be that'll be my permanent body shape of the bear. And here we go. Push and turn, push and turn, push and turn. And try to keep the bear in the center. If you don't, you can always straighten them out on the marver a little bit. There's several different ways to straighten them, but try to keep them in the middle. Now, since I've been working on the bottom of the bear and not the top, I'm going to go back and increase my propane to get a much softer flame, and I'm going to do what's called flashing. And what I'm doing is building heat back into the glass so that I can keep it to the 900,000 degree area so I don't crack it. Now I'm going to go back to my regular flame. Now we're going to make the face and the nose. The nose, we're going to pull out a section of glass out of the ball. So I don't want the whole ball hot. So now I'm going to go ahead and use a grazing flame top and bottom so that it all strikes the same piece of glass, but does not get the ball of the head where it's malleable and it's going to move. Now, once I get it really warm, I'm going to take a piece of 3mm rod and I'm going to wave it in and out of the flame to get it warm. I'm going to rest on my marver. I'm going to come in right in the center of the head, and then I'm going to give it a little pull, okay, to create a outward dimple. We're going to wait a couple of seconds, and we're kind of wiggling my punty. I'm waiting for it to cool off enough that my punty will just crack away. Almost there. And there, it just pops away. Put the hot side back on your rest. Now I'm going to melt that section of glass because it looks like Pinocchio, and a bear doesn't have a Pinocchio nose. And I'm going to heat from all sides, and I'm going to let the glass start to fall back on itself. This nose is going to be really important because that's our reference point for the rest of our project to get the legs and arms and ears and tail and everything in the proper location to make it look like a teddy bear. So now I've melted it down, and I've got a nice little round nose on the front, so that's going to give me reference as well as I know where the nose is going. The next step, I'm going to bring my fire up a little bit more, and now I'm going to take my color and start to introduce it to the flame, and I'm also putting my bear in the outer flame. And what I'm doing there is I'm going to warm the area where I'm going to make contact with this colored rod so that we can get a good weld. Just like before, I get this molten hot. I get a good reference where I'm going to stick it. I stick it, leave my heat there for a second. Then I start to heat all sides above, give it a twist, and then the bicycle pedal motion. Now, each time you put a dot on here, I'd like you to melt it in. This way, when you go to evaluate the size of each piece of dot that you've put on, you'll be able to decide whether it's too big or too small, we need to add or take away. So this is starting to round up really nice. I've got a good weld, and now I can look at it and say, okay, there's my nose, and I've got an ear. So now I'm going for my next ear, doing the same thing, letting the clear glass hang out in the outer flame to get warm, but my piece of color, as you can see, is a brilliant red. Now I can look straight down, look at the other ear, and I can make them look symmetric. Same process, stay in the flame for a second, come out, then give it a little twist in the flame, and bicycle pedal off to cut the glass. Now we're going to melt this one in and see how the ears stack up. Looks like the one I just put on may be a little bigger, but I'm going to wait till I see what it looks like when it's melted to a ball on the top of the bear's head. Okay, looking at the bear, my head, my one side is just a little bit on the large side. So I'm going to heat up only the glass I want to remove, taking my 3mm rod. I'll grab it and pull off a little bit of glass. Okay. You can also take this, put it in your knockoff bucket, and it'll crack away. Now let's go ahead and melt this ear in and see how we did, or do we need to take a little more off? Remember, using gravity can be work against you or work for you. So here I'm using gravity, heating that ear on all sides and allowing the glass to turn into a ball on top of on the bear's top of its head. Yeah, a little more to get it melted in. Well, I'm going to add another dot on the other side because that one looks a little small now, and I'm heating just the tip of my rod. Little grazing flame on the ear. I touch the molten glass, I bicycle a small amount off, and I go back to melting in. Again, it's important to melt in each time so that you know what the two are going to look like and how symmetric they'll be to each other. And we're almost there. And again, like I said, I'm using gravity to help me get the ears where I want them. Okay, so I have two ears that are relatively close in size. Now I'm going to start on the body. Now I'm going to do the bottom left leg first, and I'm going to use the ear as a reference point. Again, same process. This ball is going to be a little bigger, so I'm going to heat a little more glass up. I'm going to get the glass warm where I'm going to attach. I stay in the flame, heat both sides. I'll give it a little twist to get the thin part, or the thin section, and then I'll go ahead and now I'm going to melt this in. Now this one, it looks like I applied a little bit too much glass. And again, they don't have to be balls, they can be elongated legs. Depends on, this is your piece of artwork, so you decide how you want it. I'm going to make this guy with a little bit bigger lower legs, since I already have one on there. And I'm going to use the same process of now heating up a little more glass of the color. I've got the body warming in the outer flame. I'm going to make my stick. I'm going to heat the color on both sides, giving it a little twist, and then bicycle pedaling off to cut the glass and leaving a deposit of glass. Some glasses will be a little stringier, so you might get a long piece like I have now, and I'm going to melt that back in. Again, using gravity the whole time to get it where I want it to be. So I'm thoroughly melting this in, and I'm going to look and see how they look. I think they look fairly close in size. Now I'm going to put the upper legs on. These are going to be a little smaller, so I'm going to heat much less of the glass that I'm applying. But again, I'm putting a little bit of the heat on the clear so that I have a nice warm contact point so the glass sticks, and then we can melt it in and weld it. Okay, so I've got an upper leg, and now I'm going to go for the other side. Again, same thing. I'm heating the clear just to get it hot enough to really accept the glass. I stick my color, I give it a twist, and I come off, and using that little bicycle pedal motion that I showed earlier, we go ahead and cut the glass off and melt it in. Again, I want to evaluate what it looks like. Okay, they look pretty close to me, so I'm going to leave that. And the last part is a tail, and a bear typically has a pretty small little tail, so I'm going to heat just the tip of my color rod, and I'm going to give him a little tail on his butt. And melt that in. And it's important to melt the glass in because we're making a contact where the clear is not as hot. So we want to make sure we get it hot enough that it all melts together so they don't crack off. So now we've got our bear. We've got the basic legs, arms, ears, and a tail. I've been messing around, so I'm going to flash this. And again, remember, it's really important while you're working on any piece to make sure it goes either in or out of the kiln, or it gets flashed frequently so that the glass does not get below 900 degrees and start cracking. Okay, so now he's all warmed up. Now I'm going to work on the ears. I'm going to bring my flame back because I don't need as big of a flame. And around the room there are different sized little mashers, and that's to flatten the glass out around the ear. And I'll go ahead and heat the glass from both sides. Very important, because if you heat one side more than the other, it's going to move differentially and everything's not going to look as symmetric. I give it a little squeeze to make the round bear ear. Now I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing, heating both sides, or all sides. And I'm going to give it a little mash. It looks like I'm pretty happy with the ears. I'm just going to give them a quick melt in to get rid of any marks or tool marks that I left on the ears. So I'm just going to warm those up really well. Okay, so now I've got the basic shape of the bear. I'm going to bring my flame way back, and then I'm going to use a black stringer, which is just a piece of black glass that has been pulled down to a very fine, less than 1 millimeter in diameter. Now, I advise that you rest the punty on the bench so that one part is totally stable, because sometimes your hand will move a little bit. Now in this procedure, we're going to only go in and out of the flame very, very quickly. So I'm going to heat the area of the bear where I want the glass to stick. And when I'm ready, I'm going to go straight through the flame, I'm going to touch, and I'm going to come right back out. Because this one, I do not want the fine stringer will melt very quickly. Now I'm going to bring my flame back up for a second, and I have a dot on the end of the nose, and a bear doesn't have a dotty nose or beady nose. So I'm going to take that bead and heat it up, just a bead, and let it, using gravity, let it flow down over the little cone shape or pyramid, or however you like to put it, where I had the nose before. This may take a second or two, but get it warm, and you want it to smooth out so that it looks like part of the first mound of glass we had that made the definition of the nose. Now I'm going to come in, bring my flame back again a little bit. I'm going to warm where I'm going to put the eyeball. And once it barely starts to indicate, I am going to go through the flame, I'm going to touch, and I'm going to come right back out. Again, remember, the stringer is very thin, and probably a cigarette lighter might even melt it. And I'm going to melt that in, and I got a nice eyeball. Now I'm going to clean my stringer up a little bit, and I'm going to the other side. But again, do not put the stringer in the fire until you're ready to go through, touch down, and come straight back out. Okay, so now I have two eyeballs. Now the eyeballs are just sitting on the surface, so I don't want to take the roundness away from them, but I do want to make sure that I get a good melt on them so they're melted in. So make sure you put a little heat. I like to heat them, let them cool, heat them, let them cool, so that they don't change shape very much, but that I get the glass below warm and warm enough to make a good weld, so they don't just pop off when they get tapped. Okay, so there we go, and that's, at this point, this is where you'll hand the teddy bear off to me, but I'd like you to make sure you flash it, or if for some reason we're busy at the moment, I'm busy with someone else, please go ahead, either keep it flashed and warm, or we'll put it in the kiln. Okay, now we're ready to take this bear off, and I'm going to use a tool that's called a diamond shear, appropriately named because it's got a diamond in the middle. And I'm going to start to heat the bottom of the bear. And once he becomes molten, I'm going to grab him around the neck. You can use tweezers, grabbers, or any other tool. My choice is the diamond shear. So I'm going to get it really molten on the bottom. And there we go. I've got a nice neckline, or place where I'm going to separate. Now I'm going to grab the bear by his head, and I am, same as we did before, I'm going to, like a bicycle pedal, take the bear off. Now I'm going to heat just the bottom of the bear. And I'm going to pull away any of the excess glass that I left from my cut. And then the last and final procedure, I'm going to heat the bottom of this bear up really, really warm. Again, on all sides. Very important that you heat the glass on all sides, otherwise it will not flow the same, or flatten out the same, or move the same. So now I got it nice and warm, and I'm going to take him over here to my marver, and I'm going to flatten his bottom. I'm going to go back one more time and get rid of some of the chill marks, as well as get him ready to even it up. And I'm going to set him down again. Well, let's see, he's a little top heavy, so we're going to look at it one more time. I'm going to use my tweezers and grab the bear and see why he's not sitting quite right. There we go. There we go. So we now have a teddy bear. I'm going to go ahead and take him to the kiln so he can stay nice and warm. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you learned how to make a teddy bear. As you can see, all my teddy bears are happy and they came out really cool. All of the materials and tools that you saw used today here can be found at AmericanGlassRoots.com, and there will be a link in the description.